Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. This is session 12 of MOOC 9, Digital Currencies in Developing Countries. We have a relatively shorter set of questions, which I think we can comfortably handle in this session. So before I go to those, I want to do a couple of logistical items that are important, since this is the last session of the MOOC, and congratulations everyone who is still with us in session 12. The final examination is going to be accessible May 11th to May 14th. It is 50 multiple choice questions. It is 2 hours in duration. 60% is the passing grade, and if you have a passing grade, your academic certificate will be published onto the Bitcoin blockchain within a month, and you will your accomplishments will be written for eternity into the Bitcoin blockchain, and I think that's a pretty cool and fun thing to exist. The other thing that gets you is if you later proceed to either the Masters in Digital Currency or one of the professional certificates, you can get credit for the course if you've taken the examination and done well on it. If you have not, you will not get credit for having come through the MOOC. So I strongly encourage any of you to take the final examination. Same theory holds on the positive side. If you have a high score, there's additional scholarships that you can receive. Andreas, can you help me with that? I forget the exact cutoff. But it can help you with reducing your fees on the actual MSc program if I think you're one of the 20 highest scorers on the MOOC. I think it's something like that. So, long story short, we would very much like you to take the final examination, both for your own personal development purposes and also if you later continue on any other certificate or degree program with the University of Nicosia. So that's bucket 1. Bucket 2, some of you may be at Consensus next week. I am going to be at Consensus next week. I am speaking on Wednesday morning. Please come find me if you're at Consensus. I love meeting folks that are in the program or in the MOOC in person. Stop by my session. And if you're around at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, we're going to be having an event for folks in any of our programs, including the MOOC, at our offices in New York. They're in a facility called Galvanize, and keep an eye on your emails. Irene is going to be sending the details about it. So it is going to be 6 p.m. on Wednesday. So second bucket of things, I'm going to be at Consensus. Say hi. I'm going to be in part of a session on Wednesday morning. Say hi. And if you're around, come with us on Wednesday evening around 6. We'd love to all meet up. And I think it's going to be a pretty large group, though. I think be several dozen people is my expectation based on what happened last year. So look forward to meeting some of you next week in person in New York. Third bucket, for those who are not proceeding with the master's program or other professional certificates, we will be releasing our unique community platform that will allow you a place to get together with others. It will allow, there will be a job board. Keep an eye out for that. Stay part of that. I think it's a great way to stay up to date with each other and with all of us. And fourth bucket, if you can be in Athens between the 14th to 16th of November, we're going to be hosting Decentralize 2018. And it's our second conference. It's our flagship event of the year. It was really great last year. It was really great that students were able to come. So if you can work Athens into your November plans, we'd love to see you there as well. So those are the logistical items. Thank you again for being part of this course through this session. Let me go through the questions now, and then we'll see if there's anything else we should chat about in the chat. So, first question, and this is a good one. This is actually the best statement of this question I have seen so far. For an unbanked population in the developing world today to access cryptocurrency, wouldn't they need at least one of the following things, which are impossible by definition? I'm going to put a bracket around that because that's kind of drawing a conclusion, and I'm just going to stick with the question. A bank account to deposit money onto an exchange. B, enough crypto adoption in their community to buy it locally in cash. C, expensive mining rig plus expensive high-speed internet plus expensive electricity. So another way, the other way to say this question is like, well, it sounds very nice that the unbanked are going to be using cryptocurrency, but how is that going to work in practice? Like, how is that going to work? How's that actually going to work? And I think at the first instance, as in question number, as in this question, it is correct that it is difficult. And so, particularly if you're defining cryptocurrency as Bitcoin. So if you're one of the major existing cryptocurrencies. So let's actually walk through those examples because I think they're right. So you are somewhere that is cut off from the traditional financial and banking sector. You are, I don't know, let's imagine you're in a village in an agricultural region in a developing country, and there's no banking services in your village. That's why you're unbanked. And you're now supposed to start working in Bitcoin or Litecoin or Monero or Zcash or Ethereum. I actually think that is difficult, right? So let's work through the options. You're not going to be able realistically to mine for it. If you're the type of village that doesn't yet have a bank branch, that's unbanked, you're not the type of village where you're going to be ordering miners, setting them up with a high-speed internet connection, and doing your own mining. So I think that bucket is out. Second bucket. Oh, let's say we want to go to one of the big exchanges and buy our cryptocurrency there, so then we can use it in our unbanked location. Well, the big international exchanges, the way you onboard is actually through fiat in most cases, right? You have to have a bank account in a sovereign currency. You use that bank account to send money to exchange. By sending money to the exchange, you then buy cryptocurrency. So by definition, if you're unbanked, that route is also gone. The third bucket is, well, sure, maybe I can buy cryptocurrency in my community with cash or with my labor, let's say, similar. Well, I mean, that sounds okay theoretically, sort of. I mean, it's more possible than the other two that are, I think, pretty much close to impossible. But then you run into the question of, where did the person who's going to sell you the cryptocurrency get it from? Right? So someone must have first solved one of the first couple of problems and then brought it into the village at sufficient scale and somehow makes sense for everyone to not use their national currency and use this other currency. So yeah, I think as we stand now with current structure of current big cryptocurrencies, the idea that they're going to serve the unbanked in difficult developing civil situations in developing countries is unlikely, certainly not this way. So I agree with the question. Now let's flip the question on the head and say, how could it happen? What would be a mechanism that it might happen? And none of these mechanisms are perfect, or would I even necessarily say likely, but let's think about it. First bucket could be through remittances. So let's say my village has a large number of people who have family members working abroad. And those family members working abroad have to pay very high amounts to transfer money back home, and prohibitive amounts if they are small payments that they have to transfer back home. So the mechanism by which that would work is that someone is sending cryptocurrency from a developed nation to a developing nation. And enough people in that community are receiving cryptocurrency that you suddenly get a mini economy working with that cryptocurrency in that community. And if there's some percentage, if that X percentage of the community has cryptocurrency, you could actually have a functional economy because you have someone to buy it from and so on. So one mechanism by which it ends up in the community could be remittances, something from the outside world. Second mechanism could be, and I'm not saying this is likely, but it is at least possible, you could have some locally issued cryptocurrency, right? So yes, it's true, it might be difficult to get your hands on enough Bitcoin to run your community, but maybe you could have a community coin that you're issuing yourselves, and you issue it all the way to everyone in the community. And it serves as a form of kind of local script that could be electronic in that community. Again, is this super plausible, super important? Maybe. Maybe that will happen, maybe it will not. I don't think it's going to happen in huge quantities, but it's at least theoretically possible. The third way is just to wait, right? So what does that mean? In theory, if one of these currencies does catch on, eventually you will have exchanges in every country. You will have people using it in every country. You will have the ability to push through cryptocurrency electronically, and by electronically in these situations, you probably mean mobile phones, across these countries. And maybe it just filters out from most likely the more urban communities into the more rural communities. So I agree, actually, that a not immediate usage case is that people who are unbanked, who have limited access to financial systems today, who have limited access to internet, are going to be the early adopters of paying for everything with cryptocurrency. I think that I'm myself anyway slightly skeptical of cryptocurrency as a retail payment system as it's in its current form. It will happen, I think, but not yet, let alone in these communities. But I do think it's not impossible, as the question says, just not likely to work in those ways and might come in other directions. And the reason I spend so much time on this question is every time we have this discussion, there's a lot of questions on this topic. And I mean, even some of the questions today that I'll read now are just another version, of this same question. And so a lot of people focus on that, right? Like, oh, the developing world, and do people want to make payments in cryptocurrency in small villages and in the unbanked, in the slums, and poor urban environments and rural environments? Okay, question. So I'll leave that as an open question. I'm not sure. Related questions. Are there any promising projects that provide a solution for the inherent barriers that prevent crypto access for unbanked populations? Well, promising, I don't know, right? Like, people are trying things. I think the answer in all these cases to the unbanked question, is that, yeah, these will run on a mobile basis. But that's also, by the way, the answer to payments in general in the developing world, right? And, you know, it's interesting. You see how these platforms are evolving. So like mpesa was one of the early movers for African cryptocurrency payment oriented businesses. And if you look at where they are now, they have evolved into more focused on B2B payments and some for FX transactions. But the main push of their site is B2B payments. And so do business across Africa with easy FX and B2B payments. So that's a legitimate usage case. That's a usage case we see in even the developed world with firms like Veem, V-E-E-M, where they're saying, look, who has significant foreign currency transactions to make on an ongoing basis? Usually not individuals, usually businesses. Can you undercut the pricing that their banks are giving them across certain payment rails, certain pairs of currencies? If yes, if you can be less expensive, given that they're repeat customers and that you move reasonable volumes, the acquisition cost of signing them up might be worth it for the revenue you'll make from managing their payments. And so it's interesting. I mean, this does not, it's simultaneously a good thing, right? Like making foreign currency transactions less expensive is good for everyone, but more good for people in poorer countries than people in wealthier countries, because on a relative basis, those fees are more onerous. And so is this a good thing in general for the world? Yes, I think so. Is it what people immediately think of when they say, oh, well, how is cryptocurrency going to flow through the developing world? And, you know, less making trade finance and trade payments and B2B payments more efficient is not the sexy thing that necessarily comes to mind, even though that's probably the thing of right now. Now, related to this, another question: how can digital currencies be used for mobile payments in the developing world? Can we build a mobile system like M-Pesa with cryptocurrencies? So we never get through the session without talking about M-Pesa. And M-Pesa is a really interesting situation. So it is arguably the most advanced, or it was at some point the most advanced electronic payments system in the world, in that a huge percentage of the Kenyan population was using M-Pesa to conduct transactions, where this was still very uncommon even in Silicon Valley, even in New York, even in London. Now, the question, though, is how did it get started? And the reality is it didn't get started in any particularly decentralized way. It got started by piggybacking on a very centralized network. Right? It got started by piggybacking on the mobile network. And so now you have this interesting question where, okay, so it's a great story about leapfrogging, right? So Kenya had a huge number of communities who were unbanked. No plausible mechanism by which banks could afford to open bank branches in all these areas, or were planning to do that anytime in the next few decades. Nor is that necessarily the right thing. Like in developed countries where you have bank branches, in many cases you're closing them. So there'd be no need, if you're in Kenya, to go build a bank branch so you can then calculate and say, well, why do I need this? Let me close it. So this is what sometimes leapfrogging is a real mechanism that does occur in the developing world, and it can be very powerful because somehow if you wait long enough, you realize you can skip a whole generation of things, and that's what we did with M-Pesa, right? We skipped bank branches in Kenya. So what you had is one centralized megacorp, the phone company, battling other centralized megacorps, the banks, and M-Pesa was the mechanism by which they skipped a generation ahead of the banks. And so it's a great story. It's a great story about the developing world. It's a great story of leapfrogging. It's not really a great story about decentralization, in my opinion. I don't tell you much about decentralization. You know, I used to say a few years ago it was the most advanced, interesting mobile payments platforms in the world, and then you notice I caught myself a couple minutes ago, because today that has to be probably WeChat, right? So WeChat is a platform in China. It was developed by Tencent, and it now has over 1 billion monthly active users, which is just really something else. I mean, remarkable. And so WeChat started off as a chat feature, and then of course it got payments, it got all types of functionalities. I mean, in many ways, a lot of the things that you would find on a app store in the West, you'll find embedded into WeChat. You know, ordering a car, ordering food, paying for your dinner, it's all embedded into WeChat. And it's great, right? Like it's great from a perspective of efficiency and I think consumer utility. And it's exactly the type of thing that thought leaders would be looking at in the past and saying someday in the future, people are going to have the ability to do all these things on their phones. But once again, it was built off the back of a existing company, right? Like, so the payments function was built on the back of an existing large messaging platform. Because what's the point of this? One of the tricky things about retail payments, you need to have enough liquidity, you need to have enough people accepting it and using it for it to get going. So you need somewhere to bring a large enough pool together at once and release it at the same time to that pool. And like M-Pesa did with the phone company, WeChat did with its messaging app. And so it's interesting. In other words, it's a great story. I'm not sure what it tells us about decentralized cryptocurrencies. It tells us an awful lot about digital currency, right? Like these are all, both M-Pesa and WeChat are effectively digital currencies, right? They are not exactly the national currency, even though they're denominated ultimately the national currency, because they're sitting in a layer above an ecosystem of their own. Technically speaking, you have counterparty risk to the phone company or to Tencent, leaving aside that you don't in practice, you do in theory. And so these are denominated in the unit of account of the country, but they're something different. They're like a credit product. They're like a barter product, sort of. And so they're great examples of digital currencies. They're not great examples of cryptocurrencies or decentralized currencies. So it's interesting. We have not yet seen the great retail app on the cryptocurrency side. We'll see if we see it, but we have not seen it yet. Okay, now, two more questions on the same direction, then I'm going to go in a different direction. What would a new e-commerce payment system and capability look like, for example, in Africa over the next 5 years? How will it be used or live in tandem with the card schemes? How quickly do you think this could happen? I think it's a variation on the questions we're talking about. I do believe where this material is instantly useful is for merchants, for businesses, and for merchants and businesses who need to do business internationally, because in many cases, the payment systems do not work there. So if you are a Nigerian craft producer and you want to sell your crafts internationally, good luck getting a merchant account or a PayPal account. It's difficult. I believe PayPal blocks the whole country. And so this does allow you to be in business, and it's one of the kind of legendary stories of the early day of Bitcoin, the alpaca sock seller in Peru. So nothing is stopping you from downloading Bitcoin software, denominating prices in, you can denominate prices in your own currency, but you can then accept at the right exchange rate Bitcoin, and people can pay you, and you don't have to ask for permission to anyone, and then you can ship them their product. So that is viable, is a payment system, is available now, can happen immediately, and I think it's useful for this subset of payments, this subset of payments being cross-border in developing nations where traditional payment systems kind of break down. Does it become a full-blown retail system? Don't know. I don't even know that in 5 years it does. I mean, we're having these discussions in 2014. It's 2018. I don't think we're seeing a huge pickup of retail cryptocurrency use in the United States, in Europe, in China, or anywhere else. Not clear to me that that is what it's going to be. It's like the old question between Linux and Windows, and Linux for the desktop, and how Linux was going to beat Windows on the desktop, and of course Linux never beat Windows on the desktop PC market, but it first took over all the servers, and then it's in the background of your mobile phones. So it did, in fact, win, but it just won in the background. You could imagine cryptocurrencies or blockchains ending up something like that. Slightly related question with a twist. How would you create a decentralized payment transaction system in geographical areas where a government has outlawed the use of digital currency? Tricky. I think it's harder than it looks. I assume, if we're saying outlawed, that there are penalties for using it. And I further assume that we don't want to be subject to those penalties. So then you have to be able to use it without being detected, and that actually seems difficult to me. Because, first of all, if you want to have a payment system that you can use without being detected in retail transactions, as it says, you have to let people know that you accept this these digital payments. How are you going to let your customers or your counterparties know without letting the police also know? Right? So that's kind of issue one. Issue two, used in normal mode, the traffic for most of these cryptocurrencies is detectable. So are people bothering chasing after it? No, I mean, not in practice, but in this theoretical world where people are coming after you and you want people not to come after you, you'd have to get pretty sophisticated about how you're going to run through Tor and other VPNs and to do your transactions without being obvious that you're running a node. Well, is that practical? No, I don't think so. Average people have trouble, backing up their PC, right? Not running the type of operational security you'd need to avoid a state actor trying to find you out. Now, if you had a small group of people and just among you wanted to trade some payments, yeah, you could probably do it. Probably nobody would notice. But if you wanted to run a parallel payments infrastructure in a country that doesn't allow it, I don't think you can do it openly. Like, I think it's going to end up being like all other black markets for currency. It'll live in the shadows, it'll live in the edge. And you will have some risk. You'll have some risk that you will get caught and that you'll suffer penalties. So I don't think it's so straightforward, even with all the cryptocurrency decentralized techniques that might exist. Now, next, okay, I think this takes care of the questions we had beforehand. What are areas that I'm seeing that might be more interesting in the developing world? Well, you're seeing some governmental level testing and projects and adoption. And these fall in the buckets of, hey, should we test out the use of blockchain for our land registry, for example? Here you might, and these are usually not public blockchains. Maybe they should be. But they are blockchains. And this is something where there could be a usage case, there could be a rationale, because it's another form of leapfrogging. If you have a well-developed, super solid, super trustworthy, well record-kept land registry, the benefits to going to a decentralized, open, blockchain-based one, yeah, there might be some on efficiencies and application development, but you're not blowing anyone out of the water with these changes, necessarily. If, on the other hand, you have an issue in your country with distributed offices that are working on the land registry, and maybe there's an issue with, let's say, corruption. Maybe transfers don't happen correctly. Maybe you have administrative slowness. Maybe transfers take months to happen. Maybe records get lost. Maybe there's no electronic system. Recording these into a public, unalterable, auditable, append-only database could have some advantages. By the way, it's not going to eliminate all fraud, right? Like, it's not, and I'm going to explain why in a second, but nonetheless, the ability for the transactions to be unalterable, for there to be an open record trail, I think that is a plus. And I think we will see more of that. And I think we might see some more developing countries having a little bit more risk tolerance to try some of these things if their current systems don't work. super well to begin with. I want to make a point that's indirectly related to this, but I think it's an important point, and I don't think we've made it at any point during the course. And it's the difference between native tokens that have value in and of themselves and tokens that represent something of value off blockchain. So an example of the first is Bitcoin. Bitcoin means nothing off the blockchain. It has a token that is useless outside of the Bitcoin network, and for whatever reasons, has value in its own right. An example of the latter is some type of token, whether it's an ERC20 token or a colored coin or however it's implemented, that represents an off-chain asset. So this is a token that represents my house, let's say. The first model gives you all of the benefits that you hear about public cryptocurrencies. It's irreversible. You don't have any counterparty risk. Nobody can make a transaction without actually being allowed to make that transaction. You can have auto-fulfilling smart contracts, and so on. Subject always to the big asterisk, so long as you don't lose your private key, in which case it all ends in disasters or tears, because if you've lost it because someone stole it, then it's gone, and it's never coming back. And if you lost it because you just lost it, then it's also gone. And the only difference is no one else has taken it, and you can just look at it on the blockchain for the rest of your life and never be able to touch it again. So subject to that strange little constraint, then it's fraud-free, it's irreversible, there's no counterparty risk, there's all these other benefits. When you're representing an off-chain asset, a house, not exactly the same thing. You are still dependent on a trusted third party, some off-chain mechanism to enforce your rights. So let's think what that means. Let's say we agree that this token represents my house, or represents a house in Nicosia, and I want to buy it. And I go and buy the house, it transfers on the blockchain, and I'm going to go into the chat here and pick someone. I discover that CryptoCoin Cyprus, someone in our chat, is living in the house that I bought. They've moved in. And I show up and say, oh, look, I have the token for the house. And then I say, well, no, that's fine. I live here now, and you're wrong. Well, what happens next? I have to go to court. Right? Realistically, I have to go to court for CryptoCoin Cyprus to get out of my house. And so it's not clear that this is any less reliant to some type of trusted third party to eliminate that risk as any different than the current system, right? So you have that issue. You also have another issue of, okay, I'm saying, how do you assert on the chain that you own the house? Well, someone's going to say, oh, I have the private key. I have the private key. Okay. That type of strict system works. It's a good system, it works. But then it has a huge flaw, right? Like, if you're just saying whoever has the private key owns the house, fine. What happens if you lose your private key? And let's take the two examples again, right? Like, let's say you lose your private key because someone stole it. It happens. Are you really going to tolerate someone who has stolen your private key saying, yeah, I'm moving in, you got to leave, it's mine now? Or let's say you lost your private key because you lost your private key. I don't know, the advanced thing, like your digital lock only works with your private key. what, we're all going to decide that this house is never going to be used again because I lost my private key? I mean, it's one thing to say, these Bitcoins are burnt forever, and because they're an experimental technology, because they're immaterial, they're intangible, even though they have economic value, it's tolerable somehow. I mean, annoying, but tolerable. If 10 people lost their house and their house locked them out, and the house said, oh, no one can ever come in again, it wouldn't be societally tolerable because it would seem idiotic to be having a house there and then for the rest of humanity, no one goes in it. So, because neither of those scenarios seem plausibly how someone's going to implement a blockchain for the title of your house, that means even the connection between you and the assertion that you own that house is going to also have some third-party intermediation somehow. There's going to be a way where I can say, I've lost my key, but I'm going to come to you and prove to you, you being some trusted third party, that I am Antonis Polemitis, and here's my ID, and here's the contract that I used to buy the house, and it's mine. And so once you're adding that person back in, you're still reopening the door for misbehavior to happen. So it's interesting because one of the things that I think about a lot, and I haven't seen a great answer to, the blockchain tokens for off-chain assets just have much, much weaker security guarantees than blockchains that are running native on-chain assets. Like native on-chain assets do have very strong guarantees subject to you holding onto your password. Blockchains that are representing off-chain assets are not anywhere near as decentralized and permissionless and counterparty risk-free as one might think, and I suspect are going to be closer to the existing system. And if they are closer to the existing system, then you ask yourself, well, what's their use? And I think there will be a use, but the use is going to be more in the level on topics like efficiency and open access and the ability to audit and ability to build applications on a common framework and build applications in a permissionless manner. So it's going to be interesting things, but a little bit less sexy, dramatic, rebel cyber things, and a little bit more practical. This is a more pulled together way to do this type things when you have multiple parties coordinating on a database. So I'd hold that thought, and I think it might become useful to you as you evaluate opportunities, as you evaluate projects, as you evaluate companies, as you evaluate ICOs. Ask yourself, what's the link between the on-chain token and the off-chain asset it's representing? And then start thinking about all the things that can go wrong, right? It's very easy to understand why this is useful when things go right. But the tricky part is not when they go right. The tricky part is when they go wrong. And so this is, I think, one of the great unanswered questions. We don't have hugely valuable, hugely successful blockchains yet trading around off blockchain assets. And I'm curious if we will and how we will. Whereas there's absolutely a logic to on-chain native assets and how they can work. Okay, we have about 10 minutes. I'm going to hop into the comments for a second and see if we see anything relevant. Yes, thank you everyone for offering me a coffee. I was, in fact, up very late last night finishing a letter I had to finish. And so I've been dragging a little bit today. Okay, I see a few more questions about Decentralize. Let me talk about that. Let me talk about that for a second. Decentralize is a full-blown conference. We think it'll be about 1,000 to 1,200 participants this year. And we think it's differentiated in the following way. It's very balanced between different types of users and organizations. And so we have startups, we have big businesses, but we also have academia involved in the conference. And I think it gives it a very interesting back and forth between those three groups. And when I say academia, I mean both faculty from our university, faculty from other universities, researchers from other universities, students from our university, and some students from other universities. And so this mix, I think, is very healthy because there is a set of conferences that are heavily business oriented, like Consensus. There are some that are technically oriented, a variety of developer oriented conferences. From what we've seen, there's not one quite like this. And so you have a different type of interchange where you have the folks that are saying, yeah, I'm fairly hardcore technically, and I'm going to address these types of topics. And then there's folks that are more on the finance side, and they have a different view. And then you have folks on the enterprise services sides, they have a different view. And then you have the academics that are doing some really interesting cutting edge work and have the benefit of being able to be a little bit more pure about things. They can say, well, is this really right? Does this make sense? Is this a little bit more marketing oriented? Then you have students. And so with the students who are all types of different ages, there's a lot of energy and excitement about different things they're going to try and work on. So we think it's super. We had a really great time last year. I think everyone that came to the conference was one of the best conferences they had been to in the space, if not the best conference they had been to in the space. And for us, it has an extra benefit because it's really the only chance every year that we have a chance to see a large set of our community in person. And as much as the future of the world is going to be digital, electronic, and what have you, it's still a different experience to meet people in person and have a coffee with them or a drink or talk to them on a panel. And it's a different experience. So if you can make it, I would encourage you to do so. We try and keep the prices reasonable for the type of conference that it is. It is certainly much less expensive than Consensus, while still being a full-blown nice conference, and you have dinners and cocktails, and it's a nice hotel, and it's very well put together. But we keep the price reasonable so it's manageable for students and faculty and academics to also be there, not just big business. And then, you are going to have some big businesses and some finance folks and some ICO-oriented folks and some FX folks, because you want to have that interchange. And so when they say, well, it's going to go like this, and then someone push back, is it really going to go like this, or is it more going to go in this other direction? And so it's intellectually stimulating, great people, I think a very good, relaxed vibe that lets everyone talk to each other, and I think it was viewed very favorably last year. So if you can make it, we'd love to see you there. Okay, everyone, I think we're going to wrap up. I have to, in 5 minutes, we're having our sports awards here at the university for the top athletes. So I need to make an appearance there, and different athletes on the different sports teams are going to get awards, which is fun. Thank you once again for joining this course. Please consider yourselves now to be part of the UNIC family. We'd love to see you on the degree program. We'd love to see you on the certificates. We'd love to see you at the conference. We'd love to see you in our online community. We'd love to see you just if you're around. We'd love to see you if you just want to chat us or email us or hit us up on Twitter or call Irini and Andreas or anyone involved and just give a holler. That would be wonderful. And beyond that, we hope this was useful to you. We hope that you learned some things. We hope that some of these things were inspiring. And hopefully you guys will go out and do super interesting things that will push the world forward. And if you do those things, please write back to us and tell us what you've been up to and doing. So thank you once again.